The occupied West Bank has turned into another major flashpoint in Israel's already multi-front security crisis, and many are saying it might be Netanyahu's doing. We'll explain it why this is being said, but first let's understand what has happened till now. Well, Israeli settlers are being accused of attacking Palestinians, seizing and burning down their homes, torching mosques in major West Bank escalation, and all of this after the killing of an Israeli soldier in the IDF Palestine clash on July 24th. It further reached a tipping point with Al-Aqsa mosque storming by Israeli settlers. And ever since, the revenge violence has continued unabated, with situation worsening with when Qusra was besieged by the settlers and the IDF. Now, West Bank violence has drawn criticism from world leaders and the United Nations, with the US particularly also raising concerns despite IDF's continuous fierce raids to bring down the situation. In fact, the Qusra crisis in particular has put pressure on Netanyahu as Washington demands stronger action against settler violence. Now, it is also important to remember that the West Bank violence comes as Israel is heading towards a crucial national election on October 27th, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under serious political pressure. His Likud party is facing stronger opposition. His coalition is struggling to reach the 61-seat majority required to govern. And here is where the West Bank becomes particularly important. Netanyahu needs the support of Israel's hard right and settler constituencies to keep his political bloc together. So, the question is, as the violence spirals, is a tougher West Bank policy helping him protect that very alliance? So that's why watch this edition of From the News Desk till the very end, because the story goes far beyond one village, one raid or one settler attack. From the deadly Tal confrontation near Nablus to the siege of Qusra and Netanyahu's electoral arithmetic, we'll put together all the pieces to reveal why West Bank is one of the biggest political battlegrounds of Israel's upcoming elections. The latest escalation dramatically intensified after the July 24 confrontation near the Palestinian village of Tal, southwest of Nablus. 6 people were killed, including 4 Palestinians and 2 Israelis, including an Israeli military officer and a member of the settlement security team. Well, Israel described the incident as a violent attack involving Palestinians, while Palestinian accounts said armed Israeli settlers had entered the village and attempted to attack homes, triggering a confrontation. Now, the sequence of events remains contested. What is clear is that the Israeli government treated deadly confrontation as a major security incident and responded with a sweeping crackdown. Netanyahu ordered intensified military operations, including raids, arrests, and measures against Palestinians. In fact, Israeli security forces subsequently raided dozens of homes in Tal, arrested Palestinians, and imposed restrictions around Nablus. The Israeli government also announced plans to accelerate the legislation of settlement outposts, and that is where security policy begins to merge with the politics. Now, one of the clearest examples is Qusra, south of Nablus. Palestinian families in the village have faced a prolonged confrontation with Israeli settlers and the IDF. In one case, settlers surrounded Palestinian homes, restricting the residents' ability to leave and limiting access to food and water. The standoff continued for days and developed into a wider symbol of the escalating settler violence across the territory. By August 19, the situation had lasted for more than a week, with reports describing settlers remaining around Palestinian homes despite the presence of Israeli forces. Now, Palestinian PM and Qusra mayor have also reacted to the current situation, raising alarm bells and slamming the Israeli forces and settlers for their actions. Now, it is also important to highlight that Qusra is not an isolated incident. Israeli forces have conducted repeated raids around Nablus and neighboring communities. In one raid near Nablus, at least 11 Palestinians, including children, were reportedly injured as Israeli settlers and soldiers entered the area. At the same time, revenge violence has actually spread. Following the deaths of 2 Israelis at Tal, settlers attacked Palestinian villages, burned properties, and targeted religious sites. In fact, 2 mosques in Qusra and Khor were set on fire with Hebrew revenge graffiti reported at the Qusra site. Well, the result is a dangerous cycle. Palestinian attacks or allegedly attack, Israeli military crackdown, settler retaliation, Palestinian resistance, another Israeli raid, and then another round of violence. Now the question is whether Netanyahu can control this cycle or whether his government is politically intensified to keep the hard right constituencies mobilized. Well, the escalation is also visible in the use of military bulldozers against Palestinian structures. Across the West Bank, Israeli forces have demolished homes and other structures, often citing a lack of Israeli-issued building permits. In July itself, Israeli forces used a military bulldozer to complete the demolition of a Palestinian home in Brooklyn, and other demolitions have taken place in Nablus, Saltif, Bethlehem, Jenin, and Hebron areas. But perhaps the most explosive dimension has been the targeting of religious sites. On July 26, Israeli settlers set fire to two mosques in separate West Bank villages. One was Al-Rahma Mosque in Qusra, another in Ko was also targeted. Then there is Jerusalem. Al-Aqsa Mosque has become another major flashpoint. Palestinian officials said Israeli settlers entered the compound 27 times during July, while far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and other politicians participated in some of these incursions. In fact, on July 23rd, more than 4,200 Israeli settlers and members of the far-right groups were reported by Palestinian officials to have entered the Al-Aqsa mosque compound. Now this brings us to the election and the politics. Israel votes on October 27 and Netanyahu is facing perhaps one of the most uncertain political contests of his career. His party Likud is internally divided and could lose a significant number of seats compared with its current strength. As per multiple polls conducted in July, put Netanyahu's coalition at just 51 seats against 55 for the opposition bloc, while Likud was tied with the Yasser party at 23 seats each. But the problem for Netanyahu is that he cannot easily abandon the far-right parties. Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir represent constituencies deeply invested in settlement expansion and a harder security policy. Now, Smotrich's religious Zionist party was struggling to cross the electoral threshold, creating an incentive to energize its settler base. Now, Netanyahu meanwhile needs the broader hard-right bloc to have any realistic chances to form a government. Well, this very situation creates a political dilemma. If Netanyahu strongly cracks down on violent settlers, he risks alienating a constituency that could be crucial to his survival. But if he appears too tolerant of the settler violence, he risks criticism from Israel's center, the international community, and even parts of Israel's security establishment. Well, this could explain the apparent balancing act. Netanyahu can actually present military action against Palestinians as counter-terrorism, while simultaneously supporting settlement expansion and maintaining the backing of the settler movement. Indeed, after the Tal violence, his government announced that it would accelerate the legislation of farm outposts and new settlements. Well, that is why analysts have linked the escalation to the election campaign, not necessarily as proof that Netanyahu deliberately created the violence, but because the political intensives surrounding the violence are extraordinarily powerful. And with his coalition dependent on the hard right, with Likud facing electoral pressure, with questions over October 7 still remain unresolved, and with his political future at stake, Netanyahu has strong intensives to avoid a confrontation with the settler movement while projecting an uncompromised security image. And all of this could make the West Bank an increasingly important election battlefield. Well, with that, it's a wrap on today's edition of From the News Desk. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm Yash Goyal signing off for Times Now Digital. Until next time, take care and keep watching this space for more such videos.